There's three.
There's three of these.
Got it. We'd like to call the order of the meeting of the Budget and Goals Committee. Ms. Tina, can you call the roll?
Mr. Jeff Cox.
Here.
Mr. Seals.
Here.
Ms. Frizell.
Here.
Mr. Lane.
Here.
Mr. Chapin, do we have any public comments? Okay. Number 2, report on audit of the general purpose financial statement for the Livingston Parish School Board for the year ended June 30th, 2024. Eisner Amper, Ms. Dorsa.
Good afternoon, everyone. We're going to go through the PowerPoint presentation, which is the high-level overview of the audit results. You do have in front of you the financial statement audit itself, as well as the BESI agreed-upon procedures, the statewide agreed-upon procedures, and the management letter comments that we provided and issued as part of our audit process. So you do have all of those with you. I know those were all given to you in advance. So we're just going to stick with the presentation to try to do a very high-level overview, and I'm going to do it in 3 minutes. No, I'm just kidding. Okay, so just a reminder, as we all know and y'all heard, this is for June 30th, 2024. So as we look to the financial highlights, when we get to that part, it's a point in time. I'll remind you that's a point in time. I do have a 5-year history to kind of show you some comparisons of where you were, where you've been. At the full accrual basis, what we call the government-wide financial statements, and the modified accrual basis, which is your fund-level financial statement. So I just have a very high overview of that information. But first, I have to have required communications that our audit standards require that I have to speak to you about. So we have issued our report dated December 30th, 2024. It was issued December 30th, 2024. It complied with the legislative auditor's filing requirement for the 6 months period ended. And our standards require that we provide you with certain information, which regards our responsibilities related to the financial statement audit, the plan, scope, and timing of our audit that we had, any significant findings or issues that we had as we went through our audit process. Next slide. So our responsibility is to express an opinion on those financial statements to determine whether or not they're materially correct in accordance with generally accepted accounting principles. Our responsibility is to plan and perform that audit to obtain reasonable assurance, but not absolute assurance, that the financial statements are free of material misstatement. Our audit does include a consideration of internal control, but we do not give you an opinion on internal controls. That's just part of our understanding in order to design our audit procedures as we go through this process. Next slide. Standards require that we remain independent from the school board with respect to doing our audit. We ensure that our engagement team, others within our firm, and those that are required to be independent have met all the ethical requirements and independence standards. We didn't have any manners to communicate. If we're not independent, we can't do this audit. So we communicate our plan, scope, and timing of our audit in our engagement letter that was provided to you and dated July 3rd, 2024. We did not have any changes to our plan strategy at that time, and any risks that we identified in that engagement letter, we did not have any new and additional risk as part of our process. Any audit, next slide, contains the concept of materiality. We use that concept in planning and executing the audit, and materiality regarding misstatements are considered material if there is a substantial likelihood that individually or in the aggregate would influence the judgments made by a reasonable user based on the financial statements. Judgments about materiality are made in light of surrounding circumstances or are affected by the size or nature of a misstatement or a combination of both. Judgments about materiality involve both qualitative and quantitative considerations. Qualitative is the number we come up with. We don't share that number with anyone. It's a matter of professional judgment, and a lot of factors go into that consideration. But we do consider matters that are material to users of the financial statement. So when we're determining materiality, we kind of understand who are the users of this information, and would they consider the items material in nature. But it's more about the users as a group, not an individual person. So we're not looking for everybody's concerns. We cannot do that. It's impossible. So again, materiality is a matter of professional judgment, and any audit has the concept of materiality. We are required to discuss whether or not there are any significant accounting policies or unusual transactions occurred throughout the year. We had no accounting policies that were controversial in nature or adopted and had lack of authoritative guidance, and when there were no identified significant or unusual transactions. Next slide. And I apologize, I came with the weather and it just like, any audit has accounting estimates in it. Accounting estimates are particularly sensitive because of the significance to the financial statement and the possibility that the future events affecting them may differ significantly from management's current judgments and used in those estimates. So you have several large estimates. So both this slide and the next one talks about the accounting estimates as well as the related disclosures. Your other, the OPEB there is other post-employment benefit obligations. That's in note 11 and on page 48 if you want to look at that footnote. It's about 3 pages long and discusses all the estimates and assumptions that goes into your other post-employment benefit obligation. Those are retiree health insurance and other benefits that are provided. GASB requires that this be recorded in your government-wide, your full accrual financial statements for the presentation of GASB statements. You also have your net pension liability. That is your proportionate share of the retirement liability that is recorded. It's almost 269 million. That's in note 9 to the financial statements, and it starts on page 38. Your other estimates include depreciation and amortization expense related to your capital assets and your right of use assets, which are your lease liability related to your leases. So depreciation and amortization is an estimate because it's based on the useful life of those assets. So determining what that useful life is management's estimate. And so although they're widely used in practice, all the useful lives that are being used, it is considered an estimate. Claims and judgments are also an estimate. Your accrued compensated absences is also an estimate in the financial statement based on future obligations related to those compensated absences. And to that effect, I'll just let you know that next year, there is a new accounting standard out there related to compensated absences. So I do expect a change to this liability in the upward direction. So just kind of giving you all a heads up, there is a new GASB standard out there that will be effective. Mainly looking at sick leave. So you're gonna have to estimate whether or not individuals are using their sick leave. And if individuals are converting some of their PTO or leave for pension time. So that would reduce that obligation. So anyway, there's going to be some changes. New standard, it's great. We always like to implement those, so that's coming. We'll be talking about that next year. And then leases. Leases was the new standard a couple of years ago. It required all your operating leases to now be on the financial statement. So instead of those that are significant, but basically you have a right to use of an asset if it meets a long-term obligation greater than 12 months. You have an asset recorded and offsetting lease liability recorded on the financial statements. They're not exactly the same because your right to use of asset is amortized based on the useful life or the term of the lease, and then your lease liability is principal and interest driven, so it has an amortization effect. So it's a little bit different, but they're very close. And we're going to skip the next slide because all the estimates are the very significant disclosures that are required to say, okay, for all the estimates that are significant, the disclosures related to them are also significant. Moving on to the next page, talks about corrected and uncorrected misstatements. We did pass what we call an uncorrected misstatement related to subscription-based information technology arrangements. We term them SABITAs. This operates similar to a lease where you're financing subscription licensing agreements over a long term. So the total, there's no fund balance effect on the modified accrual because you're looking at basically proceeds and an offset expense. But on the government-wide, the net effect would have been about $595,000 which was chosen not to be recorded just for the maintenance of having to keep up with that. It wasn't considered material to the financial statement. Page 10 is our other required communications. It talks about if we're aware of any consultations that management had with other accountants about differences in accounting policies or anything like that. Obviously, we didn't have any of those issues. We didn't have any unusual transactions. We did not identify any material instances of non-compliance with any laws or regulations. There were no disagreements with management. There were no difficulties in performing our processes as we went through our audit process. And except for the matter we identified in the report to management, we did not identify any potential or known fraud. Now moving on to the numbers. So this shows you a 5-year history of your governmental activities of net position. If you want to follow along on the financial statement book, it's page 12. This breaks down net position. So net position is your assets plus your deferred outflows minus your liabilities minus your deferred inflows equals net position. So it's equity in a normal corporate financial statement. You'll see here that net position is actually a net deficit. That net deficit is a result of those large OPEB and net pension liabilities. So every government in the state of Louisiana has pretty much a negative number showing in, quote, net position. But you will see over the 5-year history that it has improved. So we went from a negative 274 million, and we're now only at a negative 99.2 million. So improvement over 5 years. We have a significant improvement over the 5-year period. A lot of that relates to the additional funding, ESSER funding, and things that have come over the last couple of years that you've been able to utilize for other purposes. And so that has improved a lot of that, as well as changes in the estimate. As that liability goes up and down, assumptions change, your proportionate share changes, it also impacts that net position. So all good news. The numbers on this page, the red is your restricted amounts. So in 2024, majority of your net position is restricted. That's for grants, taxes, debt service, school activity funds. So that money is set aside, can only be used for those purposes. The brown box is your capital assets, the net book value of your capital assets. So that's all your capital assets, less any debt associated with those assets. So that represents about 250 million. As you can see, that's also been increasing as capital improvements have been happening across the district over the past couple of years.
Let me ask you something just for a second.
Of course.
When you say in arrears or whatever,
Yes.
is that the unfunded accrued liability?
It is not. It's a result of that. So net position, net deficit here. If you look at page 12 of the financials, we can look at that real quick. If you look at page 12, you start out with your assets. And I'll let you get the paper. This is the book here. If you want to look at the thicker book, it says financial statements. Report on audit of basic financial statements. And if you look at page 12, excuse me. It starts off with your total assets, deferred outflows of resources, and I think I said that backwards when I said it earlier, so I apologize. Liabilities, and then your deferred inflows. So your assets are your cash investments, your deferred outflows are those related to the pensions. That's part of that estimate and recognized over time. Your liabilities, accounts payable, your long-term liabilities, your bonds. You can see your other post-employment benefit liability that's due within a year, your long-term bonds, your net pension liability, and your total other post-benefit obligation. Those amounts are what's driving the negative down there at the bottom.
Okay.
So that what we're talking about there is that net position at the bottom. Make
Okay.
sense?
Yes,
Okay, perfect.
thank you.
Sure. All right, next slide is kind of the change in that net position. So you can see how it fluctuates significantly year over year. In 2022, it skyrocketed up. Really, the thing to notice about this, it's going to change, and it will fluctuate significantly based on the changes in those, specifically those liabilities. But they are all positive, so they're above zero. So that's the good side, right? So historically, y'all been doing very well as a district, and those numbers have been consistently above that number, so that's good. The next slide on page 14 talks about fund balance in all of your governmental funds. The brown is the general fund, but I'm going to comment here that the general fund that's reported here is not just Fund 1 that you typically see. It also includes Fund 2, which is your second sales tax fund. We combine those for reporting purposes. So if you look at your internal financial statements that are presented to you, you have Fund 1 and Fund 2 separately, but we combine those for reporting purposes. So when we're looking at fund balance, you can also see that that has also improved, so we had a historically increase in your fund balance in total for all governmental funds. The brown box for 2024 is 136 million of net position. Of that amount, Fund 1 has 75 million of that, and Fund 2 has about 62 million of that. So just kind of keep that in mind, because the Fund 2 is restricted for construction and maintenance. So, just kind of keep that in mind. But all of that has been improving. So the other green, the other funds, make up things like debt service, your school activity accounts, and school lunch fund balances. So those are the other, all other funds amounts. And then the next page kind of talks about that change in your general fund. So that's your operating income, if you will, change in fund balance, between just the general fund, which is Fund 1 and 2, and then also all your other funds. So the spike in 2022, you did get some insurance proceeds, and your sales tax had gone up that year significantly over the prior year. Down in 2023, you had operating grant revenue declined from the prior year, so you had significant operating grants in 2022. Those declined significantly in 2023, mainly ESSER funding. And then in 2024, you actually went back up. Your earnings on your investment were up about 3.6 million, and then you got the Medicaid assistance of about 5.8 million in the current year. Questions about that? Again, point in time, June 30th, 2024. We have other required communications related to internal control. I kind of already went over the information about our not giving an opinion on internal controls. So this just kind of gives you that information, again, related to governmental auditing standards. So we'll skip that page. The important page on page 18 talks about what is a deficiency in internal control, what is a material weakness. We're happy to say we did not identify any material weaknesses in your internal controls, but we did identify two other opportunities that are best practices that is reported to a letter in management, and that's on the next slide, the two items that we identified. The first comment related to your information technology written policies and procedures and user access reviews. Not all of the related policies and procedures that are done are actually written down. So our recommendation is that everything that you're doing, you just get all the procedures and things written down. So then in case someone leaves, or you have that record and that ability to write down all the practices that you're doing. There was no formal periodic user access reviews for certain of your smaller applications. While you have limited users in that software, we do recommend that those get reviewed on a more periodic basis because it is best practice. So just making sure you scope those out. People that leave, they get removed from the application, et cetera. You got all the big ones, it's the little small ones. Number 2 is required that we report this to management and the legislative auditor. Y'all have already reported the matters to the legislative auditor, but it does require us to address commentary related to the two items that were reported. One related to the reimbursement of purchases for baseball equipment and supplies that totaled about $29,000 that were never received or used by the school. The other one related to some withdrawals that were identified that came out of your bank account. That was not anything here. You were able to get the money back, but it was reported to legislative auditor office, so we have to look at that and say, okay, what do you need to do to improve to prevent these things from happening? So those are the two comments that we had. With that, that is the end of my presentation, and I'll take any questions that you have.
Okay, does anybody have any questions?
I think it's a good report. Directionally, where the balances are, and the exceptions that were noted, very few. I've read an audit report before, and it looks good.
Thank you.
No, they do a good job over there, or keep us out of trouble. So nobody has any questions?
No, sir.
None at all, huh? All
Thank
right,
you.
do we have a motion to accept the report of the audit of the general purpose financial statement for the Livingston Parish School Board for the year end June 30th, 2024? Mr. Frizell makes a motion, Mr. Link seconds it. All in favor say yes?
Yes.
Yes. Motion passes. All right, number 3. Discussion and action on the 24-25 budget revision. Ms. Amy. I think she's already given all y'all the books. Y'all can look through.
Is that on? Yeah. Mr. Purvis, Mr. Link, members of the board, I'm here to present to you the 2025 revised operating budget for the Livingston Parish Public Schools. We'll begin on page 6 with a recap of the general fund budget. We're projecting revenues of approximately $273 million, expenditures of $284 million, which leaves us with a current year deficit of $10.9 million. We have a prior year surplus of $74.8 million, which leaves us with a net surplus of $63.9 million. Of that, $27.8 million is in restricted reserves, which leaves an undesignated surplus of $36 million. If you turn to page 50 in your book, it's the breakdown of our restricted reserves. Just so you can see what makes up that $27.8 million. All right, if you turn back to page 8, it breaks down our expenditures by object code. As you can see, the majority of our increases in this budget are in salaries and benefits. The major increase here is the cost of the 13th check that we're going to distribute in May. The original budget was approved in August, and we did not include the 13th check because it had not been approved yet. The check is projected to cost about $7 million. We will use part of that restricted reserve, which is set aside for first sales tax, to cover part of that. We have like $4.3 million set aside, but the rest will be paid out of our other surplus. That's going to cost about $7 million. Some of our other large increases in benefit is the health insurance that we picked up when the board decided to cover the increase in employee premiums. That's about $700,000. On page 9, in code 30, you see an increase of $963,000, purchase professional services. Those are funds that were sent to us by the state and are designated for high dosage tutoring. So we have a corresponding revenue that matches this, not dollar, because we had to split it between stipends and the tutoring, but this money we receive from the state. So this isn't a output of general fund money. In code 50, other purchase services, you'll see an increase of $500,000. This is programs that were previously paid by ESSER funds. And you'll also see increases there in liability insurance premiums and liability claims. On page 10, in code 60, there's a large increase in materials and supplies. The majority of this is a coding correction that we made for transportation. If you look back on page 9, in the 40 section, purchase property services for repairs and maintenance, you see a decrease of $460,000. That was moved to materials and supplies. The other major increase there is the school allotments. In the past, we've recorded those as a transfer to schools, so we didn't have it as an expenditure, and now we're budgeting it as a direct expenditure from general fund. The last major increase in the general fund is on page 11 in code 70, and that's an increase of $2.1 million, and that is to purchase the new air-conditioned buses and to retrofit our current buses. So those are the major highlights of what increased our expenditures for this revision.
Is that the total cost of the retrofit, or is it a scheduled retrofit over a period of time? What is the duration?
Yeah, well, this is this is to purchase some of the buses and the retrofit. All the retrofit is budgeted here.
Okay.
We're gonna have it all hopefully complete, in this budget year. But we did spread out the buses, and some will be purchased and some will be leased. All right. So pages 13 through 18 detail out our revenues for the general fund. And then pages 19 through 48 are our general fund expenditures broke down by function.
Anybody have any questions on general fund? Any questions on general fund?
No, sir.
Good?
All right,
Second sales tax.
all right. Page 52 is our second sales tax. We're projecting revenues of approximately 41 million, expenditures of 36.8, which leaves us with a current year surplus of 4 million. We have a prior year surplus of 61.5 million, which leaves us with a net surplus of 65.8 million. Page 56 through 58 is a crosstab that breaks it down by by districts. And then 59 through 88 are your individual districts.
Anybody have any questions? No questions?
All right.
Amy?
Page 90 is 7 mil maintenance. We're projecting revenues of approximately 11.4 million, expenditures of 11 million, for a current year surplus of 417,000. We have a prior year surplus of 1.4 million, and that leaves us with a net surplus of 1.8 million. Page 92 breaks it down by district, and 93 through 112 are your individual districts. This is the 7 mil maintenance is what we're going out for renewal for in May. And just so you notice, the transfer that we have to transfer in to keep this fund afloat is $4.8 million. We transfer that from second sales tax. So just to cover the expenditures in this fund, that's what has to be transferred already.
And how much is it bringing in right now?
It brings in 6 million,
6 million?
and our expenditures here are 11, so.
And this is to do upkeep all the grounds,
This is,
any
this is the
repairs or
maintenance on the
we have on the
schools.
schools, anything?
Yep, any project that's less than 250,000 comes out of this
Comes out of this,
fund.
okay.
Mhm.
It's been enforced for
Since
a
the-
long
not yet.
time. One of the core funding,
Yes, sir.
Much, much needed, for sure,
yeah.
Yeah.
especially with some of the older schools.
Yeah, the facilities have grown a little bit over that, period of time.
Just a little.
Slightly. Anybody have any questions?
Mr. Purvis, as far as this, importance of this, 7 mil, as far as what would happen for the bid if, it wasn't?
Well, I mean, I think Miss Amy's discussion about the 4.8 is a testament of how important it is because, you know, our expenditures are 11. We're only bringing in 6, and we're having to transfer 4.8 from another fund into this fund. So I think just that alone shows, but this is what pays, like she said, under our 250,000 or less. So all of our maintenance, that's what we're referring to here. And when you go to look around at our schools, one of the things that I think sets us apart in our district is, even if our facilities are old in some places, our facilities look really good. And projects. And so without it, we wouldn't be able to maintain those schools. And I think that's the thing that we have to remember, because we want our students to go to a facility that's safe as well as well-kept. So that would be detrimental.
And I know for me, and I'll speak on my behalf of just being a Denham board member, I can't get over, with us having 30-something schools, it seems like every day we have something that's breaking or needs to be repaired, and it's never a $5,000 fix. It's always a lot of money when a chiller goes out or something like that. So, being able to have the money to be able to get that fixed, if it's an air conditioner or whatever, and get it done quickly is very important for our students and that kind of thing, so.
Absolutely. And to help draw people into our district as well as, we have a place that looks nice, we have a place that is functioning for the kids to come. I think that's a draw to our parents.
Yeah.
Well, those things you're talking about, chillers and stuff, that stuff, we have to get fixed.
Yeah,
We don't
yeah,
have
we
a
don't have a
choice.
choice. It's gotta be done.
It's
That's
got
right.
to be fixed.
Yeah.
And one of the things I've been impressed with is that when we have to fix it, how well our teams consider the options. If it's something they can fix that will be durable, they do it to save money.
Right.
It's very well managed and responsive. I think they're good fiduciaries of the funds they get.
They work very hard for that.
And just to back up what you had said, Jody, I know a couple of years ago, I went to a 50th anniversary for a school. And I just started looking around at the school for 50 years, and I'm thinking, man, this place has been around 50 years, and it really still looks good. The paint is updated. They maintain this thing well. So this is the fund that helps to continue that. So I think it's very important.
Absolutely, and I appreciate those questions, because this is something that we're gonna have to have lots of discussion on and really show the importance, so I appreciate those questions.
Sandy?
Now we're gonna move on to the sinking fund, page 114. Projecting revenues of 12 million, expenditures of 12.4 million, which leaves us with a current year deficit of 440,000. We have a prior year surplus of 5.2 million, so that leaves us with a net surplus of 4.8 million. Page 116 breaks it down by district. 117 through 127 are your individual districts.
Any questions on the sinking fund? Sammy?
All right, page 129 is the construction fund. We're projecting revenues of approximately 13.6 million, expenditures of 32.1 million, which leaves us with a current year deficit of 18.4 million. We have a prior year surplus of 36.4 million, which leaves us with a net surplus of 18 million. Page 131 breaks it down by district. 132 through 147 are your individual districts.
Any questions on construction? No questions? Sammy?
Okay. Page 149 is school food service. We're projecting revenues of approximately 17 million, expenditures of 20.2 million, which leaves us with a current year deficit of 3 million. We have a prior year surplus of 10.6 million, which leaves us with a net surplus of 7.5 million.
Any questions on the school food? Amy?
All right, page 154 is our disaster fund, projecting revenues of 11 million, expenditures of 193,000. Leaves us with a current year surplus of 10.8 million. We have a prior year deficit of 6.6 million, which will leave us with a net surplus of 4 million.
Any questions on the disaster fund? Sammy?
All right, page 158 is our federal funds, and we begin with IDEA. And all of our federal and our state funds are just in and out, revenues and expenditures So idea is 10.2 million in revenues and expenditures. Title I, 8.7 million. Our other special programs of 1.5 million. Other NCLB programs, 3.8 million. And our COVID or ESSER funds, 3.2 million. And then page 165 is our state funds. We get 277 million in 8G funds. 277,000 in 8G funds. Yeah, just see if y'all paying attention.
Yes.
And then our other state programs, 2.8 million.
Right, does anybody have any questions?
I have one question just about the federal funding as to, you know, what we're all hearing on the news with some of those changes. Do we have any idea of how that might affect us, or do we have to kind of wait to see where that's gonna come? If they give the money to the state, or how that's gonna be doled out?
You know, I wish I had a good answer, a definitive answer for you, but at this point, the only guidance they have provided us is that, you know, it's something that we have to keep an eye on, and we will have to follow along with the department's, you know, LDOE's information, but right now, we're not real sure, to be honest with you.
Follow the bouncing ball, I guess. Huh?
Yep.
So we'll just have to keep an eye and wait, huh?
That's exactly right. And I really wish there was an answer, but have you ladies heard of any additional changes?
None at all.
Yeah, and I was with some superintendents yesterday, and we talked about that, and we were all kind of in the same boat, that we're having to wait to see what's gonna occur.
Well, there were several thoughts. One was that, and this is, I know this is all speculation at the moment, but it is in the news and it's looking, but as far as the DOE, our Department of Education at the federal level, is that they might move some of those to Department of Health, they might move it to many other different areas, or they might give block grants to the states. So, like I say, I was just kind of wondering when I saw federal how, I'm sure y'all were all wondering
yeah.
too.
We get, Jody and I have gotten emails, or Mr. Purvis and I have gotten emails saying that our FEMA for the flood, like, they're continuing on with that process. We haven't received them, but we are getting notified that they have been approved. So, we're just hoping.
Yeah, we will.
And is the state superintendent, I mean, is there a what, do we know how we're gonna learn together at the state? Because if it's coming to the state level, whatever the occurrence is, you know, it seems like that our connection with those folks and serving the local superintendents and the boards.
Correct. When it all initially started, he sent us a letter stating their stance, and that the letter was essentially, we're continuing to watch this. At this point in time, the funds that you are most have been in the news and they're very concerned about, those funds have not been frozen at this time. We will continue to work with our attorneys, and we will keep you posted on that. And that's, since that correspondence, as far as just like email or newsletter sent to us, we have not received any. But like I said, I was at a meeting yesterday, and to my knowledge and from what we talked about yesterday, there's no change from that.
Any other questions?
No, sir.
All right, do I hear a motion to accept the 24-25 budget revision? Mr. Seal makes the motion, Mr. Link makes the second. All in favor say yes?
Yes.
All right, all of them said yes, motion carries. Do I hear a motion to adjourn?
Mr. Cox, just real quick, I want to, first of all, thank you all for going through this and approving those changes. Look, this is a massive amount of work on our business department, as well as all of our other departments that's providing that information. So I appreciate y'all, I appreciate all of the other departments here, and just continuing to try to make sure that we're good stewards of the funds. and that we're very conscientious of how we're spending and just watching what's going on. So, thank you, I appreciate that.
Yeah, like Mr. Purvis said, I'm sure we all appreciate what y'all do, and, you know, y'all probably hear from us pretty often with questions, so we appreciate y'all answering them all.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank y'all. It does help to have people who do the right thing. We don't have to answer all those questions. Thank y'all.
All right, I think, Mr. Seals made the motion, and Mr. Link seconded it. All in favor say yes?
Yes.